You are now listening to theGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified.
Well, hello, GRIO fam, and welcome back to another episode of Writing Black. I'm excited by all the people we feature on this podcast, but this one is, it gets me in the feels. All right. I was a huge fan of This Is Us from the time it came on to the last episode. And we have one of its writers here, Eboni Freeman, who, actually I shouldn't just say writer. You've been a story editor. You've done you've worked in so many capacities with this, groundbreaking hit show.
Just breathe. Come on now, breathe with me. There you go.
I would just wish that I could make time stand still.
Randall.
Time after sometimes you picture me.
It's the first time in 36 years you've said the words, "He's my brother."
You've said.
So thrilled that you're here with us. I think you might be the first screenwriter that we've had on the podcast, and which excites me as well because TV is such a big part of my life. Always has been since I was a kid. So we're gonna jump right in. Is it true? I'm looking at I was looking at your IMDb page, and is it true that this was like your first major gig, like being on This Is Us?
Yes, that is very true. I basically, it was my first staffed writing gig. I was previously, before that, I was working for Fox Sports for it was almost 10 years before I broke into the business. I had been writing pretty much since I'd graduated undergrad at the University of Michigan. I'm from LA originally, so I moved back to LA. I was like, I'm gonna make it as a writer. And, I thought it was gonna be like 1 year, maybe 2 tops. And it just, it takes time. And I started out writing features and then transitioned just I thought, I wanted to be mostly a feature writer. Eventually, got really interested in television because of what was happening in television at the time. There was Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder. And I just felt like the stories that I wanted to tell were more suited, or it was happening more in television. And moved into that space and got into the Sundance Episodic Lab in 2016. 2018, got the gig on This Is Us. So that was the trajectory.
I mean, that's a tremendous trajectory, though. That's a big deal, especially because This Is Us was already on in 2018, I believe, correct? So you knew what you were walking into. So the fact that you were getting hired to be on an already hit show is a big deal and says a lot about your skill. One of the things that always struck me about This Is Us, and I think, when I look at the fan base, the fan base that I know, the Black fan base that I know, I think we'd all agree is that this is a storyline that could have easily kind of sat in that pocket of especially in the treatment of Black characters, could have sat in that pocket of white savior stories, with this Black child adopted by this white family. And yes, obviously everybody on the show has their storyline. But what attracted you to this particular show? What was it about? I mean, obviously, aside from the fact that it was a hit, but what excited you about the stories that you would be able to tell with these dynamics at play?
Yeah, I think, I joined in season 3, at the beginning of season 3, and I was actually, a huge fan of the show before I went in for the meeting. And, writers know, a lot of the times you go out for staffing gigs and it's shoot, I've never even watched it. Let me catch up with seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I actually went into the meeting. I didn't even need to prep in that particular way because I had been keeping up. I was a super fan. I knew the characters. And I think the reason why I was such a fan was because it's just one of those shows where they're telling stories that really just, I had never seen told before. There was a story with Deja and hair loss, and I've experienced hair loss myself. And I remember watching that scene when Beth is doing her hair and helping her cover up bald spots. And I was just blown away. Like it literally made me sob because I had never seen that on television before.
How long have you had these patches? You know, my sister Renee gets them too. These areas where the hair doesn't grow. What she has is called alopecia.
So I think when I joined the show, it was just so exciting to be able to, because what you find out when you get on staff is that, you know, a lot of these stories come from the writers. You know, these are our personal lives. That's why it feels so true and so real. And so I think that's what's so cool about it and why it has, you know, impacted a lot of people the way that it has. So.
You know, I love that you said that you didn't even have to prep for the interview in that same way, because I felt the same way prepping for this interview. I was like, I don't, you know, I just want to talk about the show. I want to talk about, you know, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about the show. I want to talk about, you know, what stories were you excited to help craft during that, you know, that end of that run?
Yeah, I mean, during the end of the run, I think for all of us, it was just about like we had a lot of things that we had set up. We had a lot of, you know, loose ends that needed to be tied together. And so, you know, I was really excited to see how we moved from, because as you know, we go from, you know, all the way into like 2032 in the future. Right. So there's a lot of like ground to cover as far as getting to that point. And I think, you know, it was very cool to be able to revisit Beth's dancing story. I didn't at the time going into the final season, you know, I didn't know that was something that Dan Fogelman, the creator, had been thinking to do. So that was really cool to be able to just kind of see, okay, how did she sort of get to that Debbie Allen-esque figure of this studio in the future, you know what I mean? So it was cool that we got to finish that story out. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel like we landed, you know.
You know, I have to say it was not. Yeah, it was not a disappointing ending. You know, like sometimes you'll see a show and you watch a show and it was, you know, you're like, oh, womp. You know, you left them all in a good place. And I actually misspoke a little bit because I really meant the remainder of the run, because, you know, in that period that 4-year period that you were with the show, it's like, you know, so much happened. I mean, one of course, the most striking storylines to me was, you know, always Randall's kind of search for his identity, his family. But then also, you know, one of the things my producer was pointing out is like, you know, one of the things that's so cool about a series, you know, like we speak to a lot of people on this show and, you know, and a lot of people who write books, for instance, you know, that's there's a lot of character development that goes on there, but it's an arc, and it's like, you know, there's a start, you know, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's a finish. And obviously there's an arc in a series as well. But, you know, when you're stretching this out over years and years with these characters and you're living with them and you're living with their extended families and bringing more friends and family in, like, tell me a bit about like that experience of like growing with these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting because when you are creating a television show, like the thing that you want to do is create, of course, the great characters, excuse me, interesting characters and storylines where you can have, you know, every single season, you can have stories to tell. Right. And, you know, I think that was also the reason why Dan Fogelman decided that, you know, I know a lot of people didn't want the show to end, but I think it was the right time for it to end in season 6, because especially the kind of show that we have, you know, after a while, it's like, if we're not breaking up any more marriages, we're not, you know, we don't want to go crazy with the type in sort of manufacturing drama and sort of kind of messing up the, you know, what was great about the characters just to have more story, right? So I think it was great to have this, not a lot of shows know when they're going to end. Sometimes, you know, as we know, shows get canceled and So I think it was very cool to be able to know, we pretty much knew by the end of season 3 that it was ending on season 6. And we had, some time to set some things up. But, every season stuff changes. We would go into the room, and at the beginning of every sort of new season, we spent quite some time sort of blue skying where we think these characters are going to go, what their arcs are going to be that season. And so things ebb and flow and change. I think, you have an idea of, like, for instance, that final episode, that was pretty much shot. A lot of those things were shot in season 3 because of the kids, actors, obviously they're going to grow and change. You can't stop them from like their voices changing and deepening. And so, that final episode, I think he had a very clear idea what that would be. But as far as, where Randall was going to end up, where Kevin was going to end up, like, there was a lot of back and forth for many seasons on which woman Kevin was going to end up with, Yeah. So, yeah. So that stuff is like, that's what I think is really cool about TV because, that stuff changes. And one season it's like, no, it's really good. It's going to be Sophie. It's going to be Sophie. And then, the whole Madison thing and the twins thing. So I think it has a lot of room to grow and change. And I think that's one of the great things of a great showrunner and creator is, being open to that. Having a vision and a blueprint, but also being open to the writers in the room and the discussion and how we're all feeling about everything.
So let's take a break. We are going to come back with more Writing Black.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
Welcome back to Writing Black. We are going to continue our conversation with Eboni Freeman. Yeah, and like as you noted, a lot of the reason people responded to this show is because they had never seen anything quite like that before, but there were so many relatable moments. And as we know, life is messy, right? Yeah. It's messy. It can be complicated. It's not always linear in the way that we think it is. And you were talking about people really bringing their experiences to the table. Would you share with us some of the experiences you brought to the table during your tenure with the show?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest ones was so our Little Island Girl, part 1, that so I have a dance background. And when Dan, at the time that I joined the show, they really wanted to, they have been doing sort of those backstories of some of the characters. We learned a little bit more about their origin stories. And I know like a lot of people were itching to see like Beth's backstory. And so it was very much like on the agenda to season 3, let's show Beth's origin story. And Susan Kelechi Watson, who plays Beth, she has a dance background. And so it was sort of, and this was decided, I think, before I got there, that she was going to have a dance background, but there was no other thing about it, just dance, okay? Right. Just generally dance. Now, I get in the room, and this is my first season, right? And at the beginning, when I got hired, how it works, you get like a 20-week contract, then they decide whether they're going to extend you for 20 more weeks. They tell you that you may or may not get to write a script. So you're kind of sort of proving yourself in these first few weeks. And so as soon as we got to the Beth story, I'm like, no one else in the room had any sort of dance experience, background, anything. So I just sort of like start pitching my life story. Like I was a dancer primarily in ballet. My mom put me in it when I was like 6 or 7. And just like, I started talking about how it was to be, a Black girl in this white space, predominantly white space. And just, just the struggles with that. And that sort of morphed into what Beth's story became and how she had this dream and how, you know, and her relationship with her mom.
You are not going to give up years of training. You're going to stick to the path you chose and you will be the best.
I'm strong because of you.
If you really want this, I'm still with you, but you're going to have to work 10 times harder.
Our little island girl.
That was like directly my life in a very specific way. So yeah, that and that got me the episode. So I was pitching in the room. The showrunners came in, Isaac and Elizabeth, and they go, you know, well, Eboni's writing this episode because none of us know what we would be doing at all. And yeah, so that was how I got my first episode.
That's amazing, and I and we have you to thank for that storyline. I mean, that storyline kept evolving, and I think, you know, as you said, like her relationship with her mother, even, you know, like there was the frustration and I think for any of us creatives, you know, a lot of us have had, you know, careers that we followed that haven't really panned out the way we thought they were going to be. I mean, I was a musician before I was a journalist, right? You know, and I think like that to me, it rang so true in the way that, again, it wasn't linear, you know. She had a dream. It wasn't, the timing wasn't right all the time. You know, there were challenges, there were letdowns, there were, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay, I can't do anything else. I have to go back. You know, I thought that rang so true to creative life. And so thank you. So let's take a break. We are going to come back with more Writing Black.
Witty, honest, entertaining. Introducing Dear Culture with Panama Jackson on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app for all the Black culture debates you don't want to miss. Also available wherever great podcasts are heard.
Welcome back to Writing Black. We are going to continue our conversation with Eboni Freeman. But I also think, like, you know, that and yes, Susan Kelechi Watson, if I'm not mistaken, Debbie Allen was one of her mentors. Obviously, you know, Phylicia Rashad played her mother. And I think that dynamic, particularly, you know, not to get all like, I mean, obviously all mother-daughter relationships are different, but I do think that, you know, I found it relatable having, you know, a mother who's, you know, in one hand, you know, my best friend, right? But also, you know, our mothers challenge us. That is their job, right? To make sure that we're okay, and how, you know, we really got to see her humanity. I mean, she ended up having an arc of like her humanity. That's so cool to me. So this being your first gig, what would you say that like this, you know, you kind of rose through the ranks in this show and got to play a lot of different roles, it seems. What would you say that your takeaway was from this experience of being on a show this expansive?
Wow. Just as a writer or as...
I guess, yes, as a writer, like growth wise, like what in what ways do you feel like it stretched you and kind of grew you up as a writer?
Yeah. I mean, I really did grow. I mean, really and truly grew as a writer on the show because, I mean, like I said, it was my first ever staff writing gig and was on it for 4 seasons. And I think that, you know, you learn so much because the great thing about a show like that is you are with writers who have been in the business for 15, 20 years, you know? And so we have, you know, one of the writers on the show, Kevin Falls, he was, you know, Mr. West Wing. He had written on the West Wing and had many of his own shows, you know. Also, a lot of these writers have had their own shows as well. And so number one, you learn how to, I think, write, you know, sort of authentic characters. I think especially with This Is Us, I really, really learned how to write in a way that just felt authentic, felt like where we were really getting to those emotional moments. Like we were really making sure that stuff paid off. I felt like I really learned how to do that on the show. Really just sort of getting to like A to Z with the character in a way that was like the most realistic on how it would happen like in life. I learned a lot of, first of all, just the other great thing about the show is, and not every show is like this, but not only did we write, not only did we break the story and write the episodes, but when it was your time, when it was your episode, you had to produce the episode. So yeah, so that experience, I mean, from, meetings with the director, tone meetings, concept meetings, wardrobe, I mean, your hands casting for, the day players, the other, you're on set the whole time. You are making sure, our job on set is to make sure, because, there's different directors in TV that come in every episode, and we're there to, make sure that since we know what needs to, why we wrote something and what emotions and what takeaways we need to have, we are on set to make sure that we get those performances that we need and get, what we need for that, not just that episode, but we know what's going to happen a couple episodes later. And obviously the director doesn't know that. And so all of that set experience has just been so invaluable. I know some writers who've been writing for a while, and they're like, I haven't gotten to be on set at all, because that's just how some shows work.
It sounds like another education altogether. It sounds like,
Yes.
you like went to like college all over again for another 4
Yes.
years. Like, that's amazing. So let's take a break. We are going to come back with more Writing Black.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
All right, let's dig back into it. Welcome back to Writing Black. I mean, I don't think we've seen this kind of excitement in Black stories since maybe the 90s, early aughts. Some of us are old enough to remember that. And I think now, it's not so, even then, it was much more like sitcom-y, that kind of thing.
The UPN. And
yeah,
yes,
this is a lot. This time, I mean, we're getting to write, these really nuanced and imperfect characters who are not there for comic relief or, what advice do you have, if any, to writers trying to get into the game now? Because I know there are so many.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And, I have this conversation a lot with,
Sure. Yeah.
of course, like with other writers, and, it's crazy because I always wish that I had a more concrete way of saying, because any other career that you would go into, it's like, if you want to be a lawyer, it's going to be hard. And it doesn't mean that everybody is going to make it to that point, but there is a clear path on how you become a lawyer. The path is there. And I think with breaking into this business as a writer, and I know everyone says it really is no clear path. And, but I think that the things that I can say to do that I think were really helpful for me, and that I think I got a little bit later on in my 10-year journey to writing. I didn't really get it until maybe the last half of the journey, maybe, was that, obviously you're writing, you're trying to continually work on your craft and be ready for when that door opens, when you can, hand off that script. But I think, when you're working on that pilot or that feature, write a story, write stories that are authentic to who you are as a person. Because a showrunner who, number one, when you write stories that are authentic to who you are or authentic to your experiences, and that doesn't mean that it's like autobiographical or anything of that nature, but it's like if I meet someone and they were like worked in a psychiatric ward for like 20 years, like, oh my gosh, why aren't you writing a pilot about a psych wardener? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because
I would watch that show.
Right. And it would be good, number one.
Right.
Number two, lived it, so you're gonna write it in a way that somebody's reading it is gonna be like, whoa, like this feels super authentic, specific. And it's probably gonna be, you're gonna write it really well because, you just have that lived experience. And so the other thing is, your point of view, you always hear you want to show your voice, your writer's voice. And so I think that's going to come through as well. And so when a showrunner is getting your script for a show, that's what they want to see because they're staffing their show. Obviously, anyone that comes across their desk is going to be technically know the craft of being a writer, but it's about your experiences. It's about your point of view. Like, what are you going to bring to that writer's room or that feature film script that you are telling this story for a big time studio or whatever? Mm-hmm. What are you going to bring to it that's different than the next person? And I think that's really what makes all the difference. And that's really, when that clicked, that was really what changed the game. Like, it really did. It changed the game, and it made my stories, the things that I was writing, it made people take notice. So that would be my biggest.
I think that's a great advice. I mean, we're always hearing about like, write what you know, and that amazing Toni Morrison quote. But I think like you just kind of broke it down in a way that I actually really appreciate. So let's take a break. We are going to come back with more Writing Black.
Introducing Dear Culture with Panama Jackson on the Griot Black Podcast Network. Bring your friends for the shenanigans and stay for the edutainment as Panama debates culture wars, Janet Jackson versus Michael, Black fashions, Black mendations, and everything Black. Listen today on the Griot mobile app for all the Black culture conversations you don't want to miss. Also available wherever great podcasts are heard.
Welcome back to Writing Black. We are going to continue our conversation with Eboni Freeman. Who are you loving in the space right now? Like what of your contemporaries in the space, and I know that there are many, what narratives have excited you recently? What is exciting you right now?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, what's great is there is so much TV. I mean, there's so much TV, and it's almost like there's no way to keep up with it all. But it's also good that there's so much TV because there's work and there's, opportunity. Yeah. And there's been a lot of things that I've been enjoying. I think it's been this year. It ended this year, but one of my favorite shows this year was Yellow Jackets. I just love the whole concept. I love stories about women, and it's like teenage girls, soccer team, plane crashes. So you have like Mean Girls with
now it's Lord of the Flies, right?
Yeah, Lord of the Flies. Like, genius. It's great. It's awesome. Like, it's character. Like, I mean, I love anything that's like rooted in character, and I think Yellow Jackets balances that really well with the other sort of plotty stuff happening. I was surprised at Apple TV's Severance was another one. Like, I didn't think it was going to be like my kind of show, but it's just great storytelling, and it was very original. I think it's based off of a book. I'm not totally sure. And I think like P Valley is doing it. Katori Hall. I wasn't ready for that one. That was when I was slow too. I'm going to be honest. Okay, yes.
My boyfriend got me back into it, and all of a sudden I was like, how have I not? I want to see it every day.
Yeah. Like, Katori Hall is she's a freaking award-winning playwright, and I met her once a long time ago, but I think she is doing it right now. She is an amazing writer, creator. I'm like super excited to see. I'm sure there's something else in the works already with her and in the TV space. And she was also a Sundance episodic alum, in the first year. So yeah, those are a couple of things I think that I'm watching and I'm really loving and enjoying. And like I said, it's just literally like so much.
Well, this is, you've given us so much to work with, but I do need to know what's next for you. How do you, you're coming off of This Is Us. I know you're heading back into the writing room probably momentarily. What's next for you?
Yeah. So let's see. I'm doing a lot of development. So I'm developing a television show with Amazon now. So I'm currently doing that. And I'm also as I said, I'm in a writer's room for a show that Bad Robot is producing, based on a book called My Glory Was I Had Such Friends. And so I'm excited about that too. One of the writers on This Is Us, who's like fantastic, Julia Brownell, this is her show. And so she was so gracious to bring me on. And we just like, the writer's room is fantastic, just super smart women. And so I'm currently doing that. And I think, in the future, I also just I'm kind of getting back into my feature writing roots. And so working and developing in that space as well. So hopefully you'll hear more from me in the feature space soon.
I have no doubt that we will, but I'm really glad that we got to hear from you today on Writing Black. Eboni Freeman, thank you so much for joining us and telling us the story of This Is Us. And I can't wait to see how your story continues to unfold.
Thank you so much. This is so great. I was happy to be able to speak with you. So
me too. So let's take a break. We are going to come back with more Writing Black.
The Griot Black Podcast Network is here. Everything you've been waiting for. Black culture amplified. Find your voice on the Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the Griot mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
Welcome back to Writing Black, y'all. This is usually the time in the podcast where I talk about my favorites, MAI favorites. But, TV is such a different medium than, let's say, books or, other things. This is something that, we experience often at the same time as a community. And so I thought it would be fun for us to have a community chat about what we're watching and also let you meet some of the people who make this show happen. My co-producers, Albert Parnell and Camille Cruz, are joining me to discuss what we're loving in TV right now. Hey, guys.
Hello.
I know I struggled to get you guys to do this with me, but, I can't just sit here and talk about TV by myself. What are you watching these days? Like, what are you loving? What have you loved recently? And what's exciting you specifically in Black television right now?
For me, what I am finishing was Issa Rae's Rap Shit on HBO. I was just excited to see, a different side, like Issa Rae behind the scenes, and to see like some of the things that she's thinking and, just another side to her. It was a fun show, and it was just nice to see. And if it really is like based off the City Girls story, it was interesting to see how they came together, because that's wild. Yeah, so that was nice. I'm proud to see like just Issa Rae's trajectory. So that's been like really cool to just watch her whole evolution. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say Issa Rae is like the ultimate like glow up when we talk about like the arc from awkward Black girl to, where we are now. I have to admit, I'm going to be showing my age here so hard. I tried to get into Rap Shit and I was like, this is like the TV equivalent to me of like walking into an Urban Outfitters at this age. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm too old. I'm like, I don't, it's not landing with me. I can't fit it.
Oh man.
Albert, how about you? What have you been loving?
I've been on the All-American spinoff. There's the TV show All-American about the high school football player. But there's a spinoff to that with this, I forgot her name, but she's a tennis player and she goes to HBCU. And I've been watching that. I've been up on that. And I was like, this is pretty cool.
I might check it out.
Yeah.
It's still All-American. It's All-American Homecoming. There we go.
Okay.
All-American Homecoming. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm a big TV watcher, which, is probably why if you ask me that question, I kind of draw a blank, but like stuff I kind of loved recently, the stuff I love, I feel like nobody else likes, but I don't know. So I did watch a show about sports recently. I got into Winning Time on HBO. That was like a thing that I got into. I was like kind of
Yes.
obsessed, and I thought like the casting was really ridiculously good. I was into
Didn't
that. You know, I feel the limited series thing is a tricky thing because it's like you fall in love with the show. Like I fell in love with like I May Destroy You, right? And I fell in love with Lovecraft Country. So that's always really tricky for me. But I just like Ebony, I am a huge fan of P-Valley, like in ways that I did not think I was going to be when I started out. You know, you're just trying to support. Like, and then it's like, I'm hooked. Now, let me ask you this. Was either of you a This Is Us fan? Were you, I mean, I'm a super fan, but like, were you a This Is Us fan?
Obsessed.
Okay, thank you. I was like, the pause scared me for a second there, Camille.
I was obsessed with This Is Us. Really and truly, like waiting. That's the only show that I knew the day it came out. I knew the time it came out. I'm ready and I'm waiting to watch it. Hearing Ebony talk about the dance scenes and like that My Dearest Daughter, I forgot the actual title of the episode, but yes, hearing her talk about those, it really took me back to like sitting there watching it, because seeing those type of stories, she's so right. Seeing those type of stories, I love when they got into Beth's backstory. Even like Caribbean, you know, because there has been a lot of like more Black American storytelling happening, but now we're even getting into more layers in like the diversity of Black people in general, and now talking into like Black Caribbean and like Caribbean American, which is, you know, a slightly different history and you know, path than like Black American. So just seeing in a show like This Is Us on primetime television, you know, sharing these type of stories, it was just like amazing, like something that my whole family could watch, we could all relate to. So it was just so nice to see like, you know, her parts in it and to hear how passionate she was about it just as much as us watching it. So that's like super cool.
Albert, how about you?
I did watch This Is Us, and I loved it.
You cried. It's okay. You can say
no. Let me just say, no, I loved it. But I watched This Is Us for, I wanted to see how the father died, right? Like
Jack?
I wanted to see it. Yeah, I wanted to see how Jack died. So I was really into that story. I was like, how did this happen? And then I found out how it's happened. I was like, all right, I'm done. I was like, I came here for an answer.
So much more happened, yo.
I
so
know
much more happened.
But I literally wanted to see that, and I got it, and I was satisfied. I was like, I'm here. My heart was fulfilled. It was there.
They made you wait a long time for that, though. You had to watch a couple of seasons to get that answer.
You had to think that he died 4 times before he actually died. You know what I mean?
You're like, this episode, this is it. I know what's going to happen this episode, and then nothing.
Nothing.
Got us crying for something else.
I honestly thought he was going to pass away when he was drinking and driving. I was like, oh, that is, you can't. I was like, that's just going to be a bad message that you could drink and drive and not die, right? I was like, so he has to pass away, but no, he didn't.
And in the end, it was a crock pot and a dog.
I know. Crazy.
And I'm gonna be honest. I blame Kate. I do.
Kate, I don't even want to get into how much Kate has stressed me the whole show.
But I agree.
There have been times where I'm like, Katie girl.
I blame Kate as well. I'm like, I blame Jack too, because I would have been like, hey man, that dog only got 5 more years to live anyway, so it's not that important.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, like, look, we could joke on This Is Us for days, but I do think, you know, to Camille's point, like, this was one of those bonding moments that I think, you know, with this predominantly white cast, or at least initially, I would not have expected us to latch on to as much as so many of us did. And I'm so glad it existed. I'm so glad that they really had representation in that room the way they should have, and really encouraged those writers to tell their stories. I know for me, the storyline that always stuck out to me the most was Randall's adoption story, and his really actually his quest for his parents. Adoption's a part of my family and my extended family. So, you know, that narrative really hit home with me, particularly with his mother. You know, when we finally closed that loop, I thought was just amazing and poignant and beautiful, and I sobbed like a freak. so
sure.
I have to, and listen, it was a cathartic show. I cried. I cried a lot, but
I cried a lot
watching that show. And I mean, but at the same time, I'd be mad whenever there was like a presidential address on, because I'd be like, I gotta spend my Tuesday night with Trump. No.
I could say the one that stuck out to me, which is probably going to be an interesting one, is when when they did the flashback when Randall was a kid, and she went up to the black family asking them how to do Randall's hair, or how to cut his hair, and stuff. And I was all like, huh. I was like, because I know there's a lot of times I see little black kids walking around. I'm like, just come to me. I could fade you up nicely. Just, So I was like, so I could understand. And I have a lot of friends that have mixed kids, and their moms come to my wife and ask them, like, what do I do with this? Like, I have no idea how to deal with this. So it's like, they had a lot of real life situations in there.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think
real.
like that nuance was what made the show win for such a long time and let it go out on a high point. And thank you guys for helping us go out on a high point on this episode, and letting our listeners also see the talent behind the scenes instead of just seeing me all the time. So thank you, Albert and Camille, for giving me your 2 cents on TV. And we'll see you next week for another episode of Writing Black. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Writing Black. As always, you can find us on the GRIO app or wherever you find your podcasts. Hey, GRIO fam, it's Maiysha Kai, host of Writing Black on the GRIO Black Podcast Network, and I have a little treat for you. Not only has Writing Black been blessed to have as a guest acclaimed actor Omar Epps, but Omar and his publishers Delacorte Press have a little treat for you. That's right. Omar is giving away signed copies of his debut YA fiction, Nubia, The Awakening, co-written with Clarence A. Hines, to some lucky subscribers. But you heard that right, subscribers. If you want to get your hands on a signed copy of Omar Epps' YA debut, you've got to subscribe to Writing Black. You can subscribe on the GRIO Black Podcast Network or anywhere you find your podcast, but you got to post it. You got to take a screenshot, post it, and tag us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. That's right. All you got to do is subscribe to Writing Black wherever you listen to your podcast and tag the GRIO Black Podcast Network. And you too can have a personally signed copy of Nubia the Awakening by Omar Epps himself. So hit that subscribe button. Do it. You know you want to. Don't you want to spend Sundays with us? Come on. You love Writing Black, and we love you.
You're watching the Blackest Questions podcast with Christina Greer. In this podcast, we ask our guests 5 of the blackest questions so we can learn a little bit more about them and have some fun while we're doing it.
Okay, so this is a trick question.
We're also going to learn a lot about Black history, past and present.
Beautiful. I learned a wonderful fact today. Great.
So here's how it works. We have 5 rounds of questions about us, Black history, the whole diaspora, current events, you name it. With each round, the questions get a little tougher.
Oh, you got me. Let me see.
I have no idea.
I knew you were going to go there, Dr. Greer.
Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcast and share it with everyone you know.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.